So abolition. Who can tell me what the main tenet of abolition? What's the main idea of abolition?
To abolish slavery.
To abolish slavery, right? And not just to get rid of it in a gradual way, but it's the immediate emancipation of all slaves and an end to segregation and racial discrimination, which is a pretty high bill, right? It's one thing to say we want all the slaves to be emancipated immediately. It's another thing completely to say that we also immediately want you to treat them as equal. But the movement becomes more vocal in the first half of the 19th century, following the Second Great Awakening, because of all these religious ideologies. How can a man be free? How can all men be created equal if we have slaves? And how can we slavery and religion? So you see, especially in the Northeast, you see this movement sort of get really vocal. They start writing pamphlets, they start sending petitions. But there's a conception that it exploded in the 1830s. And my argument is that that's a misconception. So the question really for this part of the lecture is, there's a conception that the abolitionist movement exploded in the 1830s, becoming vocal and growing in size and scope. But did it really? And how effective was the movement? So when we talk about abolition, we also have to talk about anti-slavery. Can anybody tell me why there might be a difference between abolition and anti-slavery?
Because some people wanted the slaves to be free and equal. Other half just wanted them completely out of the country altogether.
Right. So anti-slavery is different from abolition, not only in its reasoning and methods, but also in its implementation. Most anti-slavery advocates prefer a gradual end to slavery, which would mean that they would outlaw slavery only in the acquiring of new slaves. So if you had slaves already, you could keep them. But there would be a gradual end to that. So typically, like in the Missouri, in Missouri, how they discussed during the Missouri Compromise time, they would say, well, when your slaves reach the age of 25, they have to be emancipated, right? Well, that didn't fly really in the South because, yes, they still benefit from that slave labor, but now only for a limited time. There was also an idea of colonization, which is when those slaves are freed, they don't stay here. We send them back to their ancestral homes. Now, what's the inherent problem with colonization?
Weren't they already here for almost 100 years? So they would probably be ostracized in Africa as well.
Right, they're not going to fit in. They don't speak the language. They've never been there. They don't know the people. They don't know the culture. This is over 100 years. Because of the 3/5 rule of the Constitution, Southern states, the slave states, had more representation in the lower house of Congress than did Northern states. So the immediate emancipation of slaves, or the gradual emancipation of slaves, you start benefiting the North, this sort of anti-abolition, because of the North being so vocal about not letting Southerners who really felt that they were sovereign, not letting them have slaves. And they feared abolition in the South, not only because it's an end to their way of life and an end to their sort of free labor system, but it's also seen as an intrusion by the federal government into what they consider to be sovereign states' rights. And they had a general fear of slaves. And I know you guys have talked about this, Nat Turner's Rebellion. Who remembers what the catalyst for Nat Turner's Rebellion was? What was Nat Turner's own opinion of himself that really made him think that this was what he had to do?
I think he was sent by God.
Right. So Nat Turner really thought he was a messianic sort of figure, right? What this led to was an increase in petition. And so you guys all know how petition works in the government, right? Have you ever signed a petition? So basically, you come up with an idea, you get a bunch of people to agree with you and sign their names to it, and you send it to the government, and the government has to look at it. And this is a right that's guaranteed to us. The right to petition our government for the redress of grievances is a right that's guaranteed to us by the First Amendment. However, in 1834, the American Anti-Slavery Society, who was actually an abolitionist society, began a petition drive against slavery, and they were vocal. They sent hundreds of petitions. So Congress passed a resolution to instantly table any discussion of slavery in the House, which meant that none of those petitions could be read. No petition regarding slavery was read in the House, and John Quincy Adams railed against this resolution. He called it the gag rule. In fact, he asked in one of his speeches, "Am I gagged or am I not?" It's John Quincy Adams. So he used these. He was a statesman. John Quincy Adams was first and foremost a statesman. So he used these parliamentary tactics to introduce these petitions. Right? He would stand up before the session began and just start reading. He would introduce a petition, but not explain what the petition was about until he'd already begun reading it. But every single time, he was rebuked and stopped. And it was more than just John Quincy Adams. This upset a lot of people. So, in 1837, 1838, 130,000 anti-slavery petitions were sent to Congress and unable to be read in the House. 130,000 signed petitions. It's getting overwhelming. So it would seem that that means that the anti-slavery and abolition movement really did explode in the 1830s, right? That's what that makes it seem like. You get 130,000 anti-slavery petitions, and you think, wow, a lot more people are really taking fire to this cause. So let's go back to our question. There's a conception that the abolitionist movement exploded in the 1830s, becoming vocal and growing in size and scope. But did it really, and how effective was the movement? No. The anti-slavery and abolition movement didn't explode. What happened with these massive increase in petitions is that people were angry, right? That they were being silenced in their constitutionally given right to petition the government. That rule was passed in 1836. There was no successful motion to dismiss it until 1844. 8 years of congressional meetings with no discussion of these petitions. So this explosion of petitioning sort of explains the misconception that abolitionist movement exploded in the 1830s, when in reality, it was still just a small vocal contingent of the population. So how effective was the abolitionist movement? It wasn't very effective. Despite the printing and dissemination of thousands of abolitionist pamphlets that were sent to the South, postmasters in the South refused to accept them in their post offices or deliver them, but slavery was abolished, right? So then the abolition movement must have done something. It cost hundreds of thousands of American lives in the Civil War to abolish slavery. And it wasn't a purely abolitionist